Wir sind hier im wunderschönen Fahrenbach und haben zwei sehr, sehr ergiebige Tage hinter uns. Und der Hippokratische Eid, Ärzteverband für den Hippokratischen Eid und MWGFD, Ärzte stehen auf und Ärzte für Aufklärung haben sich zusammengetan, um die Ärzte, die verfolgt werden hier in Deutschland, zusammenzubringen und klare Statements herauszuarbeiten, damit das nie wieder passieren wird. Und wir sind sehr, sehr dankbar, dass auch Personen aus Amerika da sind, die sich für das Thema interessieren und die einen besonderen Bezug haben zu Deutschland. Und begrüße in dem Zusammenhang Leland Lehrman. Happy to be with you, and we are very happy that you came here to Germany and thankful that you're interested in the German country, German people, and especially about the physicians. What happened to the German physicians is very special worldwide, as we all found out. And especially Robert F. Kennedy, we're very thankful that he's interested in that. And Leland, maybe you may first introduce yourself about who are you and what is your connection to the American government?
I was very active against the mandates and lockdowns around the whole coronavirus crisis. And so I was working with Bobby Kennedy early on in that and joined his campaign right away. And I worked with him on the campaign, and then I worked with him again during the transition after he joined President Trump, and then they won the election. And then after that, I launched the MAHA Institute, and then I worked for MAHA Action. And then I'm now currently working independently with the secretary, but not for him. And I also work with a number of other members of the American government on these issues, both in the executive branch, the White House, and also Congress, the House and Senate.
So Monica Young from the Ärzte stehen auf, and this connection has a good contact to you, and we are happy that we have someone who is including the questions we have here in Germany with you. And so what is your relationship with Germany in total?
Well, I think it goes back to Mimi. I had, when I was very young, my mom and dad asked a German woman by the name of Emily Betts to take care of me when they were too busy. And she spoke to me in German, and so I learned a little bit of German when I was a very small boy. And my father also loved Germany and loved German culture. Even though he was Jewish, he really appreciated its majesty, its intellectual rigor, its industrial engineering capacity, and its national strength, its strength as a nation, its historical consequence. And so he had come here to study, and he had learned German, and so he and Mimi would speak German at home. And my name is German, but that's because back in those days, the Jewish community in the Pale of Settlement of Russia often had German names because the language that they spoke was German, Hebrew. We call it Yiddish. Sometimes it's called Jewish, but it's a German Hebrew mix, mostly German.
So Lehrman means teacher.
Teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, supposedly, specifically teacher of young people or grade school teacher, but I don't really know.
Okay. So I liked your speech in our room when you presented your history and your connection with the German. You went deep dive into history also of Germany, and as you are Jewish. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think
I'm not Jewish, but my father's family was Jewish. My father eventually converted to Catholicism.
Mhm,
But if you come from a Jewish family
mhm,
and you have like a sort of
mhm,
Jewish point of view or a Jewish soul, you know it. And
mhm,
it makes no sense to try to pretend you don't.
mhm. So I think in your genes there is a pretty good knowledge about being prosecuted and that people are searching for you and putting pressure on others. And I think maybe this is also a motivation to,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. You know, I've been very disappointed in the Jewish people for trying to own the possibility of being persecuted. Um, we of all people should know better than to allow another group to be persecuted for any reason, especially if it's a false one, like medical falsity or political falsity
Mhm,
or scientific falsity. And that is why I feel like there are many of us in the United States of America, around the world, who see the parallels between the Holocaust, the plight of Jewish people in Europe in those days, and what is happening now. And it shouldn't be forbidden to
mhm,
talk about the parallels.
mhm.
It's just too obvious to pretend like that one group of people should be allowed to own persecution.
Mhm. So it should be a real democratic dialogue about the facts,
Yeah,
and that is the movement for enlightenment also.
yeah.
What we see
Well,
in
the whole
America.
arc of
Mhm,
social justice is about this. It
mhm,
makes no sense for their justice to mean one thing for one group and another for another. This isn't even justice, so you can't even call it justice anymore.
mhm. Why do you think that was surprising? Because we saw many doctors who are still prosecuted, that have no money anymore. They really fight it against them. And you said, I see the movement for enlightenment, especially in America, but also here in Germany, that we are one step before the final win
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for truth.
Yeah, I think it's pretty close.
Mhm,
In the United States of America, I think that um, we have basically won the battle for those who are aware of what's going on. But now we have to be able to win even for those who don't already know.
mhm,
So, right now in America, you can homeschool your children, you can get exemptions, you can move to a different state if you can't get an exemption.
mhm,
There are many states where you can get exemptions very easily, so you can send your children to school safely. But the real problem is that the propaganda is very strong. So unless you already have the information and you already have the courage of your convictions, you're still vulnerable.
mhm,
And so, unfortunately, many people are getting injured and made infertile.
mhm,
And the rise of turbo cancer appears to be very closely connected to the mass vaccination campaign with the mRNA in
mhm,
particular. But even before that, the United States of America, which has a outrageous childhood vaccine schedule of something like 72 shots
mhm,
uh, before a child is 18 years old, and this appears to be causing a rise of all kinds of chronic disease, and in particular autism, which is now up to something like 1 in 12 boys
mhm,
in California, where the shots are um, rigorously mandated and there's no exemptions allowed.
mhm. Okay.
So we're seeing a real crisis, not just from the mRNA platform, but from all of vaccine science, which is why vaccine science is now up for examination as
Mhm,
to whether or not it even actually works
mhm,
at all. Any of it.
mhm. So, how many people in America are thinking vaccines are good, and how many are saying no? Let's stop it. What
Yeah,
do you
there
think?
was a poll recently done by
Mhm,
the president's pollster,
mhm,
Tony Fabrizio, where he calculated that about 55% of Americans still generally support vaccines and 45% are skeptical
Well, that's
or
already,
oppose.
yeah, that's many, yeah.
Yes, and so what's significant about that, as we were talking earlier, is that that number was probably 99 supported it and only one were skeptical or opposed it only 5 years ago.
Yeah. So this is about vaccines in total, yeah? It's not
Yes.
especially mRNA, yeah?
Yes. And it's driven by the crisis. There's so many women now whose children have been injured, and they find each other, and then they start to talk, and then they organize, and then they figure out how to make it better, and they decide. So America has a very strong self-governance tradition, and men and women are biologically and culturally assigned by God to protect their children, and this is not something we are ever going to stop doing.
Yeah. So they should be well informed from both sides. They can they can listen to the doctors who are saying, please take vaccines, and the others are saying, take care if it's really needed to take vaccines, and everyone should decide on their own.
Yes, that's right. So that's right. There have been lots of polls about these things recently because the American political community has realized that these are issues that can change elections. And the 2024 election, where President Trump won, the only reason why he won was because Secretary Kennedy endorsed him. And Secretary Kennedy brought with him something like 9 million voters. And President Trump only won by 2.5. So the margin of victory belongs to those who are supporters of Secretary Kennedy and health freedom. And so now many pollsters are wondering, well, is this going to be an important issue for the future? And the answer is yes. And it's not just 55 support and 45 skeptical. Because if you ask other questions like, as an American or as a German, would you prefer if you and your doctor make health decisions for you and your family, or would you prefer the government to make the health decisions? Well, now this is not 55-45 anymore. This is something like 80 to 90% of Americans would prefer that they make their health decisions with their doctor.
It's absolutely true. Also in Germany, most people say we should take our own choice. We should not, no one should tell us if we are vaccinated or not. But people are now prosecuted if they are not vaccinating their children against measles. Measles.
Oh, right, measles.
Against measles. So that is really terrible for many mothers, how to take care, what to do. So this is already one case where they are putting the knife into people's body to tell them what they have to do.
Well, you know, measles and many of these childhood diseases, the statistical evidence, the historical evidence suggests that primarily it was nutrition and sanitation that led to the eradication of childhood disease, or major amounts of childhood disease. So if you look at the graphs over time, you can see that the amount of childhood disease is coming down. It's almost all the way gone. And then they introduced vaccines. And somehow they've managed to convince everybody that it was just the vaccines that resulted in the eradication of childhood disease. But that's just not true. And furthermore, some childhood diseases like chickenpox are actually immune system promoters. They are ways in which the human immune system, or the immune system, actually sort of turns itself on and prepares itself for a life. So this is where the whole issue of faith and science come into sometimes conflict, because science sometimes thinks, well, it's better if we get rid of all of it. But both faith and science, if they look clearly at the situation, can see, well, maybe this actually isn't helping, but we just think we're helping. And so we want to feel like we're important rather than actually doing a good thing. And I think that a lot of medicine is like this. A great deal of medicine has provided real benefit to humanity.
Yes.
But then a lot of it is pride.
Yes.
And a lot of it is conflict of interest, and a lot of it is power.
Yeah. So it's not evidence-based, yeah?
It isn't evidence-based anymore. Like it's the same as like the problem with the Holocaust. They want evidence-based only for them.
Yes. They are defining this is science, only I am science.
I know, it's just completely crazy.
Yeah.
This makes me so furious because the only people who used to do that were religious people. Religious people could say what the doctrine is, and you just had to believe it. But that's not even religion. Bobby Kennedy had a great quote on the campaign trail. He would say, trusting the experts is not science. It's not a thing in science. This is for authoritarian governments and bad religions. I think he said religion, but it's a bad religion that wants you to do that too.
It's a dogmatic science then.
It's dogmatic science and dogmatic religion. And the scientists should be especially wary of that because they fought so hard through the Middle Ages and into the Enlightenment for the right to think freely. Why would they then apply that same problematic slave mentality after having fought so hard to liberate themselves?
Yes.
They liberated themselves only to put their own chains on.
Yeah. So we call it movement of enlightenment, yeah? And because we had this phase of humanity that we wanted to become free in our mind and understand by mind what is truth. And then we come back now in an age where we feel like we are not allowed to think freely. We are told how to think and what has to be the result. Otherwise, we get prosecuted. And this is happening more and more in more and more phases and topics. So what do you think about the parallelity? You also said, especially German people have a special mindset because of their history and what is told them. There's a high education program that happened to German people and we are not aware about it. But I think from outside it would be helpful to hear your perspective on that thinking.
Well, one of the things that my dad was so fascinated by about Germany was that as part of its goal to be rigorously scientific, to be rigorously philosophically correct, to be protected from errors in order so that humanity could advance. When they decided to create an educational system outside the church, they provided a degree program that ends with a philosophical doctorate, which was the first doctorate that existed outside the church. So clearly, German-speaking educational system is historically one of the most advanced and one of the most innovative. So it's enormously tragic that such a community of highly educated people should end up in a dead end, in an educational dead end, where they are no longer able to distinguish the truth, no longer allowed to distinguish the truth because there are either pressures within the political system or pressures within the intellectual world or what have you. And a lot of those actually boil down to this question of how much of truth can even be perceived by the mind alone, and how much truth must be acknowledged to be the realm of the soul. And from my point of view, it's clear that those who argue that only the mind can know truth are making huge mistakes because in turning off their soul or in discounting its existence, they're no longer sensitive enough to actually appreciate the raw data in the first place.
Yes.
And science is based on raw data. But if you can't even experience it because your soul is dead, then you don't know that you're not even in the same ballpark as the truth, because you're building from different data. And this is especially true in science, where it's only data, right? If it's rigorously controlled in a laboratory environment. If I go out here and talk to all the people of Germany and hundreds of thousands of them tell me that they've been injured and their families have been wounded by either an educational system or a medical system that has actually hurt them, and their people are sick and dying, this is not data.
Yeah,
it's the absolute truth of your experience. You don't even have to have a soul. You know, technically you don't even have to have a soul, but you kind of do, because it's the soul that allows you to appreciate the truth of something regardless of what the experts think.
Yes. It's the
Now the experts should be the best at that.
Yeah.
But currently we don't have this situation.
It's so important that what you're speaking about, because this is a change in science, I think, that we also respect the subjective science.
It's not subjective, but it's said to be subjective because the kind of pinheads, the small-minded ones, they keep driving everything into more and more controlled environments because they say that that's the only way to know truth. But that's just because that's their personal favorite game to play. It's like if I were to say to you, I like checkers, and you say, well, I prefer chess. And I'll say, well, chess isn't even a game. I'm sorry, it is. It is also a fun thing to do. Like, just because you like to play in the laboratory doesn't mean that's the only thing that exists in science.
Yeah. What I mean is that when we have our subjective experience and we are saying the apple, it tastes good, then this is my subjective truth.
Right.
Okay, so to give the chemistry about the apple, I have no idea. We can make a lot of science about that on the objective outside plane.
That's true.
But then I still cannot say if it tastes good to you or to me.
Right. This is aesthetics, right? Which used to be one of the most important academic disciplines in all of German education. For like whole centuries, aesthetics was the primary concern of German culture and, quite frankly, of all of European culture. And philosophy was focused on it, and arts were focused on it, because this was not about science. It wasn't about objective truth. It was about what feels good to human beings, what ennobles us, what makes us feel, what makes us be the best that we can be, right? You know.
You spoke about the German Schuldkrieg, you call it. In Germany we say Schuldkult or Schuldkomplex, like Freud.
Yeah, but this is actually the complex. What I was talking about is the war guilt, which is was used against the German people, especially after the First World War, but then also after the Second World War, as a legitimation for why they should have to pay reparations, why they should have to do this, why they should have to do that. That's not Schuldkult or Schuldkomplex. That's actually the technique that was used by the Allies against the Germans. What's the name of this? That's why I thought that would be called Schuldkrieg.
Okay.
Because in America, we call it the war guilt.
Okay, yeah. So this is more about the practical plane. We have to pay, we still have to pay for this countries, and also for Europe, we have to pay everyone who's fleeing somewhere.
This was the Germans were, at Versailles, were assigned the guilt for the First World War.
Yeah, and you say it's not true.
It's not true. The best evidence that I've seen suggests that the British were largely engineering that war, and the Freemason community and British Imperial Freemason community was probably behind the assassination of the Archduke, and had sophisticated relationship with the Black Hand of Serbia. And throughout this whole period of European history, the Freemasons and the underground were working hand in hand. A lot of the anarchist and violent revolutionary activity was driven by or steered by the Freemasonic community. One of the classic techniques of the sort of warrior priest cult is that they find out what it is that people want, and then they pretend to give it to them, and then right at the end they snatch it away. Right? So the Russian Revolution was a classic example. You had the pressure from below. The human being was rising. The serfs wanted to be liberated. The Tsar decided to go ahead and liberate them. And the writers, Dostoevsky, the intelligentsia, they were all writing on behalf of the awakening spirit of humanity. And the Tsar and the noble classes were making room for this to happen. And in Germany, this is the same thing. Goethe and Schiller and the poets, they were encouraging the German noble classes to make room for the rise of the human spirit within all the classes. And ultimately, this led from German philosophy and Romanticism into socialism. And but what happens along the way, the ruling classes see, aha, this is what the people want. We'll let it come along to a certain state. And then right at the very end, we will send a militarized and highly well-funded apparatus in, and it will take over the thing completely. So this happened especially in Russia, where after the anarchists and the intelligence and the intelligentsia, the intellectuals and the poets and the writers built the whole movement of revolutionary socialism, and the kind of old guard sort of gave way before the advancing human spirit. Right at the very end, the bankers like Warburg send Lenin into St. Petersburg, the famous train with all the gold. Lenin uses the gold to buy a certain group of militarists, a certain group of soldiers, and then they proceed to kill all of the anarchists, all of the socialists, all of the kind of Kerensky government, which is sort of similar to the Weimar Republic in Germany. So it's the exact same methodology. Over and over, they know that humanity has to change, but at the end, they capture it and they tilt it back into a totalitarianism that they can control. And this is what socialism in Germany is now, and what communism was in Russia.
So the pattern, what you see in history is that this, when pressure is put highly on a group of people, you see, okay, something's going on. What is behind the story? Yeah? What kind of story do you see behind coronavirus, and especially now in Germany, the physicians are so much persecuted, and also people that didn't accept? Why is it on that high pressure?
Because the physicians are called by God to protect the health of the people, and eugenicists are intentionally trying to kill a certain percentage because they believe that population control is necessary for the governance of the world. And eugenics was never very popular, but in the 20th century, it became associated with, you know, Nazism and all of the excesses of 20th century militarism. And so now they cannot openly claim that eugenics is good for you, right? Or good for us. So they have to do it secretly. And so they do it through things like Planned Parenthood, or promoting abortion, promoting anything that will lead to infertility. Essentially, eugenics is a cult of infertility. And the way Bill Gates pretends that he is trying to help is to say that mass vaccination programs reduce population because people then don't have too many children, because they're not afraid that they are going to lose their children growing up as children.
So just...
But that's that's another,
Mhm.
that's like a pretense.
Mhm.
That's not really true. They actually know, the eugenicists know that those vaccines kill people, and they are intentionally using them
Mhm.
to kill people and also to control their fertility.
Mhm.
Because if you're infertile or have cancer, they can then sell you all kinds of fancy medical
Yeah.
procedures like IVF
Mhm.
or cancer treatments. So it's like a
Mhm.
mafia operation
Mhm.
where they break the windows and then they come and sell you protection from people that might break your windows.
Yes. Yes.
It's that
Mhm.
bad.
Yeah. So we have evidence also by Professor Konstantin Beck. Just shortly invite you to buy that book in soundoftruth.com. So it's from Konstantin Beck. He's a professor for mathematics in Switzerland, and he made the deepest study about the raw data of the studies from Moderna and Pfizer and found out the fraud, what is behind that. So just that you know, what we hear here is really evidence-based mathematics also, and is shown in this data.
Yes, also,
Yeah.
this same person should analyze the 11 million pages of FDA documents that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just released to the United States Senate.
Yep.
Only 3 or 4 weeks ago, Senator Ron Johnson had a hearing where he brought all of that data forward. The FDA, in charge of regulating vaccines, intentionally and willfully obscured the safety signal and the data with specific statistical techniques.
So, as you are, maybe say, an expert for social development and also of people development in states, what would
I specialize in fairy tales.
fairy tales? Oh, nice. Let's speak.
And in Germany, they're called Märchen, and I
Yes.
don't know what that word really means. What does Märchen mean? What's the root of the word?
Yeah, Märchen. I think
Märchen.
but I don't know the root. To be honest,
Okay.
I don't know. But it is. It's deep in the culture and in the cultural background of any nation. Yeah, we all have
It's
our
true.
Märchen. Yeah,
That's right.
and I think the newest Märchen was that the vaccines are safe. Yeah, and before there was a Märchen, we don't build a wall in the DDR. The state of DDR, the former Germany, Eastern countries. So the politicians said, no, we will not build a wall. And that was the Berlin Wall later. 1 month, 2 months later, that was done. So the eastern part of Germany, they already know this Märchen of politicians. And when they are saying, emphasizing on something, no, we will never do. And they also said, no, we will never put pressure on you that you have to be vaccinated. And all in 1 week, you have several interviews where they all said, no, we will not put pressure on you that you have to be vaccinated. And then 1 month later, they had the discussion to get it through the parliament that we have to be vaccinated. Yeah. So it was for the Eastern countries. That's why so many people in Eastern countries are more aware, because their intuition is still awake about this fraud, what is happening.
Yeah.
But more and more people now in Western Germany see the same thing. So that is changing now.
Yes, Dostoevsky is very famous for his statement that suffering is the origin of consciousness. Right. So East Germany has already suffered enough from the imposition of communism after the war. So they're aware that this is a lie sold as salvation.
Yeah. Do you think it's a war behind that about artificial, to have everything done artificially, and on the other hand, naturally, by intuition, by mind, by total consciousness, or let's say belief?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, the rational mind is still primarily a tool, like a plow or a gun, right? It depends on who's using it. And our problem is that we are powerful enough to protect small members small communities
Mhm.
through awareness and self-help networks.
Mhm.
But what we haven't figured out is how to challenge the organized hierarchical power structures, because these have thousands of years of history. They have studied the arts of control and power, and they have passed these techniques along through their family members, such that there is in these families, there's a culture of dominance, control, ownership over the social system. And these people view that as like their birthright, in the same way that the old kings used to think that they had the divine right. And so even though in the revolutionary period of the 17th century and the 18th century, we had the birth of the United States of America, the birth of modern democracy as the kind of hallmark of modernity itself, what actually happened was that you had a transfer of power from the militarily capable community to the commercially and scientifically or magically capable community. The people who were able to control the press, to control the banking establishment, to control the story of modernity and progress, these people just took over, and the militarists were perfectly happy to go back to work for them. Right? And so this is the modern empire of Davos, the empire of London, the empire of the relationship between the Freemasons and the Zionists, and all of these interlocking directorates of powerful people. They all use the same principle of systematic control and identifying the levers of control and figuring out how to own them and then pass them along to their families. So we still have the same problem with the culture of dominance, competition, all of these things. This is like a human crisis. And now it's just been advanced to a very particularly bad state where it's no longer even a naturally competitive dynamic. It's kind of a diabolical competition. Some people, it doesn't even seem like they're just fighting to control a nice world. They're like fighting to impose a horrible world. And I'm not exactly sure like why they think this is a good idea. Sometimes I feel like we just have to acknowledge that some people have just been taken over by bad ideas, by bad intent.
Dark energies, yeah.
It just has happened to some of them, and it's actually a very, very small number. But what they're able to do is identify the vulnerabilities in everybody else and just sort of pile those up until they figured out how to control a whole nation or a whole world based on the way in which they organize the shadows and control from within them.
What would you recommend to German people, and especially German physicians, what should they do to put freedom into the German country and also build partnership on eye level with America?
Well, I think that the old fairy tales are as true as they always were, right? You know, Einstein was famous for this saying. He said, if you want your children to be smart, teach them the fairy tales. And if you want them to be really smart, teach them more fairy tales. And so I'll use this sort of evidence from the United States of America as a way to say, you know, tell me, what is the analog in Germany? But in the United States of America, when we were faced with this crisis, it was very easy for us to quote the Declaration of Independence. For example, in the Declaration of Independence, it says, when any government becomes an enemy of the ends of freedom, of life, liberty, and happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. It's right there in our founding documents that the people have the right, even the responsibility, to hold its government accountable for whether or not it's serving the people. You know, and in the United States of America, all of the oaths that are sworn by the police, the soldiers, members of Congress, the president, they're all sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. And the Constitution is, the whole basis is, we're trying to create a republic that serves the general welfare of the people. So between the Declaration of Independence, which is the first law of the United States of America, and the Constitution, which is the second, we have plenty of things that we can say to ourselves, to our friends, to our representatives, in the movements, at election time, on television. This is what America is. You can't just do this, right? So Germany must have many things like this, which is why I say Germany is the inventor of psychology, the German-speaking regions, inventor of psychology, the world leader in philosophy, right? Philosophy and psychology, what are they for, right? These were for the liberation of the human spirit, right? So those are founding fairy tales, founding myths of the German culture, which you can revive, and you can talk to your fellow Germans and say, this is not German. What is happening is not German, right? And the only German that it is all the things that we're supposed to not like. We're supposed to not be like the Nazis, but this is more like the Nazis, right? And so for them to accuse AfD, who's against the war with Russia and is supporting the freedom of doctors, to accuse them of being Nazis is insane. It just it doesn't fit the facts.
But it's always happening in history, yeah? That they always...
Well, yes, you know, once you're able to terrify people with a specific, you know, black magic, you just keep doing it because it works.
So people have to freedom in themselves.
Yeah.
And be optimistic. That
you have German people need and can apply logic and history and philosophy and the truth of things in the right way, which is for the benefit of the people, as opposed to against it. It was Friedrich Nietzsche who said, what good is truth if it isn't good for life? This is a classic example of what's going on in Germany right now. All this truth, all this political truth, all this scientific truth, it's not true. One, and two, it's clearly not true because it's not good for life. And what's so sad is that they know it, because they know that they're using these truths to actually kill a certain amount of people, because they think that the truer truth is that we have a population problem. So therefore we are allowed to use a lie to kill a certain amount. I mean, no, this doesn't work. If you have a problem with the population, you can commit suicide. You can not have children yourself. But you can't just kill a percentage of the population. You just can't. It's crazy.
Yes, absolutely. So you think we have the chance to stay in peace here in Europe and to work together with America in partnership?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also with Russia in the same way?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Listen, the dominating power that terrorized everybody during COVID, everybody now realizes that that is the enemy of humanity. Everybody. Especially in the Western world. Like, I'm not sure how they're doing in China, but it's probably the same there, just more difficult. And in the Islamic world, I don't know how it is there so much, but it's probably the same, just also more difficult, because in China they have this problem of state control, and in some of the Islamic countries they have the problem of religious control. You know, we've already been through that in Europe. We're supposedly on the other side of that, right? No, we supposedly we've already confronted that.
Here in Germany,
and
many Muslims didn't take the vaccines.
Oh,
so the Muslims were more clever. They did the testing centers and made money with that, but themselves, they are not vaccinated. Therefore, they also have in the statistics, you can see that the Muslim people have still more children,
Yes.
and the Germans
Yes.
had their problems.
I don't doubt it. And, you know, there are some issues there, obviously, because of the kind of militant conquering mentality of Islam, which includes what the Chinese are now calling, as part of their own military doctrine, biological dominance. So I know that that's an issue, but it's a separate issue. It's related but separate. The thing is that whether the issue of Muslims in Germany is a huge problem, not because the Muslims are here, but because the real problem is that the Europeans and the Americans and the British and the Israelis engineered the destruction of their homeland for the purpose of taking their resources and giving Israel its Greater Israel project, which it's been trying to accomplish for so many years now. And so as a result, the Israelis and the Americans needed to find a place where they could put all the refugees. And those refugees provide a secondary benefit to these control freaks, which is that they can then convince everybody in all of the regions where they put these refugees that it's legitimate to fight against the Muslims in the Middle East, because can't you see you have so many problems with them in your own country? And so, and it's like one evil deed following another one, and built on a whole
Wave.
Foundation of evil deeds, and you just can't see the beginning of it sometimes. So, many Muslim people here obviously would rather still be in Syria or would rather still be in Afghanistan, but for the military adventures of European and Israeli people, and Israeli Americans and Jewish people who are, desperately trying to establish a theocratic state, which, if we were to try to establish a state just for Germans in Germany, they would call us Nazis. But they do it in Israel every day, and then they turn around and tell Americans that if we're America first, that we're Nazis, or that we're bad people. It's so confusing because it doesn't make any sense. It's just political manipulation.
It is.
It doesn't. It's not a coherent philosophy.
So it is, for Germans, it's very difficult to find these historical facts. I've seen books in English, you can read it. In German, it's forbidden. And if Germans are saying what you are saying, we are taken by police.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
This is very difficult stuff. Therefore, we need to have a good way of discussing it, to be open about it, as in science, an evidence-based approach and not a dogma approach.
Of course.
And the same is with history, the same is with pyramids, the same is with physics. All this stuff is suppressed. And if things are suppressed, that was a nice what you have spoken about. If it's suppressed, oh, that's important.
That's true.
Because why do they put pressure on it?
Right.
What do they want to hide?
What are they hiding?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Is there a final statement from to our listeners from CS Medicus and Sound of Truth?
Well, I don't have I think the best thing to call people to really is to their own sense of what belongs to them to do, right? So in the world of activity on behalf of the human spirit, or on behalf of the healthy, happy future that we all hope for our children, for our families, and for our communities, and for our nations, there's not just one thing that is everybody has to do. The thing is to find the thing for you personally that is your most animating that makes you the most, that makes it possible for you to bring the most that you can possibly bring. And if everybody does that, then all the stars will brighten, and slowly the whole sky will be, the sun will be bright in the heavens again. So there's not one specific thing. It is true that I really think that developing the mythological imagination, being able to resonate once again with the kind of way in which nature and myth, fairy tale and philosophy and poetry, the way in which they help us create a coherent worldview where the rational mind and our soul are not at war with each other, but that all serves the goal of life itself. I think this is perhaps the best single statement on behalf of a group that is highly competent intellectually and is devoted as a vocation to the cause of life. I think maybe Nietzsche's statement, once again, worth saying, what good is truth if it isn't good for life?
So that everyone should find his mission and his potential, how to...
And hers.
And hers. To develop his personality and his path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not to shy away from the poetic journey, the soul's journey. Because so many people think, oh, this is useless over here. Poetry, useless. Philosophy, useless. Mythology, ancient history. We don't care about this anymore. No, the sources of power are in those areas. The thing that makes you alive enough and inspired enough to actually say something or do something that is interesting enough to other people that maybe they'll stop in their regular daily existence and do something new. All of those sources of power, they all come from those supposedly useless parts of life.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much.
It's great to be here.
Yes, it's fantastic. You did your journey many times, hours to travel, and we would be happy if you come back again when we have the next meeting here
in September. Yeah, I'd love to.
And so thank you also to the Doctors Conference of Ärzte stehen auf, Ärzte für Aufklärung, MWGFD und Ärzteverbund Hippokratischer Eid, that they organized this fantastic area in Fahrenbach, and we are happy that we have you with us, and also your colleague Steffi is also there, and you wonderful people. And we are happy that you help us to come to truth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.